Hello, friend, and welcome to this members only, patron only mini cast. If you are listening to this, you are part of an exclusive group of patrons and supporters, and I could not be more thrilled that you are here. Thank you so much. Today, we're going to do a little deep dive into Henry and Anne's trip to Calais. This is an incredibly important event. One of those things that it often just makes appearances in the books, and then they went to Calais, and that's when they probably started having relations, as it were, and had a secret marriage and all of that. But we're going to do a deep dive into why that trip happened and what happened on the trip, not getting into too specifics, but yeah, just kind of talking about it. So let's get right into it. By 1532, Henry VIII was finding himself in a very precarious position within the political web of Europe. His marriage to Catherine of Aragon had become an international scandal as he sought an annulment to marry Anne Boleyn, whom he viewed as his rightful partner and future queen. However, his desire to reshape England's religious and political alliances in favor of his relationship with Anne faced fierce resistance, especially from the Pope and Catherine's powerful nephew, the Holy Roman Emperor Charles V. With England caught between the major Catholic powers of Europe, Henry needed a strong ally. France, under the rule of Francis I, seemed like a perfect candidate. Francis shared Henry's ambition, enjoyed a rivalry with Charles, and was no stranger to bending traditional alliances to suit his own goals. The 1532 summit between Henry and Francis in Calais offered a rare opportunity to shift the balance of power. For Henry, this meeting was a chance to solidify his bond with France and display his commitment to Anne as his queen-to-be. For Anne, this was her moment to secure her position and prove that she was more than just Henry's consort in waiting. She was his political partner. The journey to Calais and the grandeur of the summit became as much a display of legitimacy and power as it was a diplomatic negotiation. Similarly to the Field of Cloth of Gold, the other summit that took place 12 years prior, the journey from England to Calais was meticulously prepared to demonstrate wealth, power, and stability. As they traveled, the entire procession was reflecting Anne's newly elevated status. Henry had lavished gifts upon her for this trip. He'd just given her Hanworth Manor, and he spared no expense in ensuring that her appearance would command respect. He bought her new clothing. Every detail, the accommodations, the regal displays, was carefully chosen to reinforce Anne's role as his future queen. Anne wasn't just a passive participant, she was an active part of this. She understood the stakes of this trip and approached it with a determination that reflected her ambition. The anticipation of meeting Francis, a fellow monarch with the power to endorse or dismiss her and whose court she had served at previously, fueled her resolve. As they neared Calais, her focus was on proving herself not only to Henry, but to the French court. She already knew that every glance, gesture, and word would be scrutinized, and she was ready. When they arrived, Henry's commitment to Anne was evident in his lavish displays. He presented her with various gifts, not just as tokens of affection, but as statements of political support. The symbolism of Anne's personal heraldic emblem, her white falcon, was particularly notable. The falcon, perched with a crown and holding a scepter, symbolized Anne's status and authority as a queen-in-waiting. She wore the emblem proudly, aware of how such imagery played into her role in Henry's life and on the European stage. The visual splendor extended beyond gifts. Henry had arranged for a luxurious display of clothing, accessories, and even new saddles for their journey, each one designed to catch the eye and convey power. Anne's heraldic colors and elaborate dress conveyed not only her beauty, but her rightful place beside Henry. This was not just a woman traveling with a king. This was a future queen showing her wealth, taste, and status. Now, one really interesting note is that Halley's Comet was visible for much of August, and there was a lot of comment about this. For Anne, it seemed like a really good omen. She was going to be off to France, and here was this comet just kind of announcing to the world that this change was happening. Anne had been made a marquess right before. She was now eligible to sit in the House of Lords in her own right. And just before they left, Henry published A Glass of Truth. It was one of the early propaganda campaigns that outlined his position and argued that his marriage was invalid. And the text itself was over 80 pages long. And so A Glass of Truth was rolling off the presses as they were leaving as well. So Henry was making this announcement to everybody. Look, my marriage is invalid. I have this woman now who's a marquess, and there's a comet. What more can you ask for? It was this event as well, this summit, that actually caused the rift between Henry and his sister Mary. Mary refused to go with Henry. She was invited, of course, as the sister of a queen, as the previous queen of France. She was invited to go along, but she was so angry about what Henry was doing. She refused. She used her declining health as an excuse. So there they are, off to go to this summit that was going to last for 8 days, half in Calais, half in Bologna. Now, Francis was wondering who was going to receive Anne. Francis knew that he could not suggest his wife Eleanor because she was Charles V's sister. So that was not going to work. Henry and Anne actually proposed Marguerite of Angoulême, who was the Queen of Navarre, but she wasn't available to come to Paris. In the end, Anne had a small retinue, only about 20 to 30 women, and she was greeted and received in Calais by Sir Richard Wethill, who was the mayor. When Henry and Anne first arrived in Calais, they actually stayed in the castle in Calais for about 10 days, and the Venetian ambassador said that she lives like a queen, and the king accompanies her to mass and everywhere as if she was such. Then the summit begins between Henry and Francis on the 21st. They met halfway between Calais and Bologna, and each arrived with about 600 people in their retinue. The high point of the event from Anne's perspective was on the final evening when they were in Calais. Henry put on the most amazing banquet for Francis in the Great Hall of the Exchequer in Calais in the castle. There were thousands of candles. There was a buffet that was like 15 feet high, filled with gold and silver plate. Anne was not actually with Henry during the banquet. After the banquet, this group of female dancers came in. They were all dressed with masks hiding who they were, and they were dressed in cloth of silver, cloth of gold, and they chose who they wanted to dance with. Now, Anne was still masked, but she chose Francis. And after a few dances, Henry walked around and started removing the masks from the faces of the women. He removed Anne's and announced who she was, and Francis was apparently quite impressed. The reports are that he was talking animatedly with her for an hour or so. And this allowed Anne to really prove herself on the world stage, prove herself in France. Now, the success of the summit actually made things harder for Catherine of Aragon. It made tensions with the Catholic Church a little bit higher. Henry insisting on presenting Anne as his future queen was a very bold defiance of Rome and set the stage for his eventual break with Rome the following year. But he saw that Anne could present herself well, could actually be a queen, and so he felt emboldened to pursue his divorce a little bit more aggressively. And it was the success of this event that gave Anne the confidence to kind of give in to Henry. They had a secret wedding ceremony, which was probably not legally binding. But after that point, Henry and Anne did start sleeping together. So it was a huge turning point in their relationship. Anne returned to England feeling triumphant and feeling secure. She had gained recognition from both Henry and Francis, feeling for the first time like a queen. And for Anne, at that point, her place beside Henry felt assured, the culmination of years of ambition and struggle that brought her within reach of the crown finally. So there we have it, a little bit about the Calais trip. Thank you so much for listening and for being here. If you have any episode requests, as always, just drop me a line and let me know, and I will work it into the schedule.
Blow, northern wind, a scent will make me sweating. Blow, northern wind, blow. grote boer din bouwre briek, dat solis semlis ons